We're live? Oh, yeah, we're live. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday night Kabbalah class, where we delve into the deepest secrets of creation. And we are holding in the Sefer Yetzirah on page 57, for those following along in the English Sefer Yetzirah. I got to start right here, too. Okay. Welcome. Good. Page 57 in the Sefer Yetzirah. We are now on chapter 1. We're about to start a new subsection 7. So we're in chapter 1, subsection 7, and we're continuing on with this theme of the different sefirot and the mystical dimensions of these sefirot. And I'm not going to go through a whole recap, but the sefirot are basically God's communication tools for how he interacts with us and with all of creation. They're the channel that godly energy connects, what we would say, from spiritual worlds or the upper worlds to the physical world down below, and also to the spiritual worlds above, to the angels, to all the creations. It's through these sefirot that we can build and have a relationship with God, and we can interact with God. Without these sefirot, God in his infinitude would be too removed, too lofty, too holy, too distant to be able to have a communications with us. So it's kind of like a device that God created, and all these sefirot, as we've been learning over the last several months, have different energies to them. And now we're going into a little bit of a deeper explanation of this sefirot. And again, I pointed out in the last class, it seems like, which is again very interesting, because the Sefer Yetzirah is a very short, condensed book, although there's a lot of commentary and there's countless explanations and commentary written on it. But the actual text itself is very, very short. And the fact that for numerous chapters, Avraham Avinu, who by most accounts is the author of the Sefer Yetzirah, starts every single one of these subsections with Esser Sefirot Blima, 10 Sefirot of nothingness. And just important to point out the the significance of that pasuk, because there's no reason why after every single subsection he keeps bringing out that same thing. Esser Sefirot Blima. I think this is like the 6th or 7th section in a row where he's brought her out, maybe more. And it continues on for several more subsections. Again, just to show the Torah doesn't waste words. So if they're adding Esser Sefirot Blima, it's showing how important this concept is of Blima, which literally means nothingness. And we're getting into the text in a second, because this is really interesting, where the Sefer Yetzirah goes on to explain why we need physicality to connect spirituality with. But this concept of tense.
Yeah, but wait. So we need physicality to connect to spirituality.
Yeah, you can't.
That's crazy.
That's what we're going to talk about.
Something that it doesn't.
If you light a match and you remove the match, what happens to the flame?
Right.
The flame can't. It has to hold on to something. He's going to talk about that in a second, like a flame in a burning coal. This is the concept that is spoken about numerous times in Kabbalah and Chassidus, that the flame is spiritual and the coal is physical, and they need each other. That's why it's so important. And that's why it says the heavens of heavens cannot contain you, God. That only the essence of God can only be revealed in gashmis, in physicality. Because, again, just this mushal, a fire, which is the most out of all the elements other than maybe air, it's the or one of the most spiritual. It needs something to hold on to, or there's no fire. It's the same thing with us. If you just have ruchnius, you have no gashmis. Right? It says in the Mishnah, if you have Torah without kemach, without flour, you don't have Torah. Meaning there has to be a physical vessel for the Torah to rest on, which is even the greatest sages in old times would work. They don't go around collecting money. They were Torah scholars, but they would work, because the work is, it's a vessel. It's holding down the ruchnius of the Torah. So we're going to get into this concept of how spiritual and physical must be connected. But again, the Sefer Yetzirah goes at great length to call these sefirot blima, which is a huge contradiction. Because if they're nothing, then how could they have any substance? So they're 10 sefirot. Each one has a different dimension of energy to it, but each one is what we say blima, nothing. And this is kind of the dichotomy, if you will, in all of Judaism, is physical and spiritual are complete opposite energies, and yet they come together. That's the whole point of our body, right? What does our body do? It's holding on to physical and spiritual together, right? Adam is Aleph, Dam. Aleph, is godly energy, and Dam is the most physical blood, the most physical aspect of creation. And these two opposite energies come together inside of a body. So they need one another. They have to balance one another. And this is the energy that is supposed to come together as one. This is Ma and Ban.
So why would, like, for people that we, thinking of myself as considered someone spiritual, so hard for me to understand this concept?
I wish I could explain why you can understand a concept, but I can't.
No, I meant to. I don't know. It doesn't. It's hard to register. I don't know.
It's the same thing as telling a very successful person they need spirituality in their life. They'll say, "What for?" It's a foreign concept to them, because to them, who needs spirituality? I got my Ferrari, I got my mansion, I got my boat. What do I need spirituality? It's the same idea. I've got God, I've got Torah, what do I need the physical world? It's because it's not balanced. It's it can't be shlemut. It can't be complete. It's like someone saying, "Why should I get married? I don't need to get married. I'm fine by myself." Because you're incomplete. You're half of a soul. It's the same concept. So it may be foreign, but it's something that, like a lot of things we do, because this is what God instructs us to do. It doesn't have to make sense. But when you do it over time and you become a vessel for it, it starts to make sense. But you don't need to make sense of it to do it. You need to do it, and then it will make sense, if that makes sense. Okay, let's read inside. Esther sefirot blima, 10 sefirot of nothingness. No'otz sofan b'tchilasan, their end is embedded in their beginning. B'tchilasan b'soifan, and their beginning in their end. Kishlehevet kishora menachalas, and like a flame in a burning coal. She'adon yachid ve'ein lo sheni, for the master is singular and he has no second. V'lefnei echad ma ata sofer, and before one, what do you count? Okay, this is
When I read the English, it's explaining the Hebrew.
yeah, I know. That's why I always try to explain in English, because it's even. How are you? We're going to be in this subsection for a while, because it's deep. So let's hop in. So he starts in the beginning. Their end is embedded in their beginning. Excuse me. According to most commentaries, the beginning is Keter, crown, while the end is Malchus, kingdom. These are two endpoints of the spiritual dimension. We look at this at the sefirot, at Seder Histalshus of the chain of creation, as a chain going from heaven to earth, and every single level connected, above to below. But we have to remember is it's not linear, meaning it's not just a straight line. At some point in time, and this is what happens in Mashiach, the end and the beginning connect as one. And you go from having a line, if you will, to a circle. And that's infinite. That's when the end and the beginning, you can't define them anymore. And this is the ultimate dance in our own lives with God, of how much is me and how much is God, right? Because we can have too much netzach, meaning too much it's me and I got to do everything, and too much hod of God's taking care of everything. You can have both.
How do we find that balance?
That's a good point. That's a good question. So you can't come to a middle point without going to a long point first. In other words, it says in the Petach Eliyahu prayer in Erev Shabbos, it says God created the sefirot, one long, one short, one middle. This is how it goes. It goes long, short, middle, long, short, middle. And it's an important lesson in life, meaning at some point we have to just do it. We have to just take a chance, right? I read my wife and my daughter a little quote the other day from, I read it in Forbes magazine. I forgot who it was attributed to, but it was a very successful person. And she said, when I was young, our father would come in every day and say, not every, once a week, he would come in and say, I want each one of you kids to tell me something that you failed at this week. And if we didn't have an answer to tell him something we failed, he would get upset with us. And she said, I learned over time to realize that failure isn't trying and not succeeding. Failure is not trying. So Father wanted to embed inside of them that this is what failure means. It's a shift in perception. We think failure means I tried, it didn't work, I failed. No, that's part of process. That's called a step in a process. To not do, this is the ultimate failure, because you can never get to the balancing point by sitting on the sidelines, right? You can't sit on the side and in your brain try to figure out how much to do. You got to do, break, fix, break, fix, break, fix, break, fix. And you keep breaking and fixing and breaking and fixing until what happens is the gap starts narrowing. And in anything in life, I don't care if it's in sports and business and friendship and in any arena that you could think of in life as a game in that aspect, there has to be this concept of you have to keep trying and trying and trying and trying and trying, because there's no way to get to that point. There's no way to get to the point.
The breaking is it's like painful.
Of course it's painful.
It's a feeling of rejection. I don't know how to explain it. It's like a painful. I don't want to do it again.
Right. So what's the alternative?
So how do you?
I'm just going to sit on the couch for the rest of my life and do nothing.
This is what I did.
Guess what?
They're not trying.
Correct. You know, I heard a beautiful quote one time.
I can't stand the feeling of the pain.
So I heard a beautiful quote one time, and it kind of answers that. Every single person in their life must deal with pain. Point. You have two pains you can go through. Pain of facing the obstacles and challenges and keep pushing through no matter how many times you fail, or pain of getting to a point in your life where you regret that you didn't do it in your past and you eat yourself alive as you get older and time goes by and you say, what did I do with my life? That is more painful than dealing with the pain in the front. I promise you. That's why there's so much depression in old people. That's why there's so many of these old people are miserable and depressed and sad and angry, because they no longer look ahead at, you know what, let me try. And if I fail, I'll try again. They look behind and say, what did I do with my life? It's gone. Now what? Now you got to numb yourself with pain medication because you're so upset and frustrated that your whole life disappeared without dealing with the pain of life. So you got to deal with the pain. Where do you want to deal with it? Forward or behind? I prefer to deal with it forward.
I know.
But God forbid, because you don't know what that pain is yet, because you're still not at the point. Okay. But God forbid, you don't want to get to the point where you're 60 or 70 and then it's like finished. Really, because that is more pain. It really is. You know, the missed opportunities, the whole life that went by that we did nothing about. There's no worse pain than that. In fact, it's not even just in this world. It says the most painful part of an neshama, of a soul, after 120 years, when the soul has to go through Gehenna to clean and purify itself. It says out of all the suffering that soul goes through, the most painful part is not the non-kosher food or the not Shabbat or not. The most painful part is all the time that was wasted in this world. In the afterlife, that soul can't deal with that pain of looking back and watching their entire lives of every opportunity that God chose. And I gave you this opportunity and that opportunity and that opportunity and that opportunity. And you're sitting there and I'm sorry, I didn't know. Sorry, but the pain of dealing with that, they say, is the most painful aspect of Gehenna. So it's not just in our physical lives, it's in eternity afterwards until we get cleaned of it. So yeah, that's what it is. What can we tell you? So,
I got another question.
Okay.
Because life is going from up to down.
Yeah, that's Seder Yishtalshelus, but the end is wedged in the beginning.
And in the end, the wedges, it's like a circle.
Yeah.
So it's feel like the energy was a male going straight. And in the end, it's going to be a female going straight.
Interesting. Yeah, they similar idea. They come together.
Yeah.
That's why it says Eishes Hal Teres Bala, right? What is the crown? The crown's Malchus that goes up to Keter, so it causes the circle.
Energy is going to.
Yep.
Okay, I'm not disturbing you.
You're not disturbing me. I appreciate the questions. It says from your students, you learn more than from anyone else because they make you think about what you're explaining. Okay. Yes. Okay. Please go ahead.
Silly, but is it the same idea? That image of a snake eating its tail?
Yes. Very good. Very good.
So
right.
exactly, we're talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the gematria of snake, right? Nachash is 358. You know what else is the gematria of 358?
Mashiach.
Mashiach. Good.
The same snake that
So,
we have like
The same snake. Show me your pain and your suffering, and I'll show you your redemption. The biggest challenge and hardships and difficulties God gave to us, that is the path to our redemption. And it sucks. Believe me, because no one wants to deal with their pain. But that's where you find redemption. And in fact, it's brought down in several places in secular and judicial studies that the only reason God puts anyone through difficulties or challenges in their life is so they can go through it and help other people in similar situations. Because it's one thing to tell someone, listen, here's what I read. It's another thing to say, I've experienced it. Everything that I talk about and I teach, it's from my own pain and my own. I learn. I'm pretty learned. I like to learn, but it's life experiences of being beat down and knocked down and failing so many times to the point where I'm like, I'm done being a victim. I'm not living like this anymore. I'm not. I've buried my head in the covers and cried and done every possible thing to run and to hide from God in my life many times, 1,000 times over. And in the end, I'm like, all right, so who am I hurting? God. I'm hurting myself. And eventually I'm not living like this anymore. And it's hard. Unfortunately, life is not meant to be easy. It's meant to be good, but it's not meant to be easy. And, we've gotten accustomed to good and easy are synonyms, and it's not true. It's not true. It's in fact the opposite. Most people who have reached any level of success in their life will tell you it's not the result. It's the effort. It's the work. It's what they've had to go through to get there. That's what really shapes us and makes us who we are. So in the most basic level, Keter is seen as the concept of cause, while Malchus is the archetype of effect. Since a cause cannot exist without an effect cannot exist without a cause. And the two are interdependent on each other. Right? Every action causes a reaction. Everything we do, this is another concept that took me a long time to drill in my head because I was the most indecisive person in the world. Fear of making a decision, because whatever choice I ever made turned out to be wrong. Because no matter what happened afterwards, the voice gets in your head and say, why'd you go left? You should have went right. Why'd you pick blue? You should have picked red. Why'd you call that person? You should have called that. The Yetzer Hara is not just what it means. Hara, Yetzer Hara. We're accustomed from, you all more than me, from growing up. Yetzer Hara means, okay, you're not keeping kosher, you're not keeping Shabbat, but it's the voice that's against God, which is true. But it's the voice that's against anything. The main job of the Yetzer Hara is to confuse you, to put doubt inside of you. So whatever you pick, there's going to be a voice that says, wrong decision, should have picked the opposite. Right? Like sit there like, do I go left or right? Go right, go left, go left. What makes yourself crazy? I used to do that all the time. And then I make a decision, and if it didn't go the right way, then comes the voice, you see, I told you so. And then you eat your kishkas, and then you regret making it, and then you're afraid to make a decision again. But the reality is the only wrong decision is not making a decision. And that took me a long time to realize that if you don't make a choice, you've made a choice. You've chosen not to make a choice. You've constantly said, I don't want to be hurt, so I'm just not going to do anything. Okay, so you picked that path. It's stepping out of the way and saying, okay, I'm just not playing this game. You've chosen to make that decision. So it's circular logic. It doesn't really solve anything, right? At the end of the day, you just got to step in and go. And this is, to answer your question, Shannon, what from a personal level, what happened is I learned over time to just do my best. I put a little sentence together in my brain, which was correct, don't regret. Correct, don't regret. In other words, I ate myself alive with all the regrets until I got to a point of regretting so much. I'm like, this is not healthy. So what do I need to do? I need to just say, all right, what's past is past. What maybe if I had the decision or this chance come that I can maybe tweak or change a little bit, then change instead of regretting. And then what happens over time is you have to just keep working and working and working no matter what it is. And then eventually you start getting a little bit more of a flow. And I still do this dance with God, like how much do I do and how much is God? This is a dance for the rest of your life. But the window has narrowed a lot more, where before it was just like, I was just like a bulldozer, just, running through. And I've learned to hold back a little bit and give space for God in different areas. Sometimes I feel like I'm giving too much space. So how do you know? You adjust, this is the adjusting mechanism. So, the Sefer Yetzirah likens this to a flame bound to a burning coal. A flame cannot exist without the coal, and the burning coal cannot exist without the flame. Although the coal is the cause of the flame is also the cause of the burning coal. Because without the flame, it would not be a burning coal. And this is the idea that we spoke about a minute ago, which is that the flame is spiritual and the coal is physical. And you need to have both of them married together. And you can't look at a burning coal and say, well, what's on fire? Is it the flame or is it the coal? Because it's both. Without the coal, there's no flame that's holding onto it. Without the flame, the coal's not lit up. So it's this cause of an effect relationship, right? Which caused what? Okay, you could say, well, the flame caused the coal to burn, maybe. Or maybe the coal caused the flame to have a place to go onto it. So ultimately, what the Sefer Yetzirah is telling us is you can't say one is the cause of the other. They both work symbiotically. And just like in a relationship between a man and a woman, the goal isn't for one person to wear the pants or be the dominant person. They're always going to be a leading personality, but the goal is, as we've known from so much work, is to get to a state of flow where there's a level of respect and understanding, and it's no longer of, well, I'm right and you're wrong, right? That's where most problems start, is both people put their foot in the ground and say, I'm right and you're wrong. That's not the case, right? Someone's telling me something about office today. I can't believe it. I'm like, who told you that? Oh, did you hear what the other person told you? No. I'm like, then don't start casting judgments on what you think is going on when you've only heard one person tell you one half of the story. It doesn't work. So the same idea of this masculine and feminine energy also reflects physical and spiritual energy. That the goal is not to be more physical or more spiritual. The goal is to have a symbiotic relationship with physical and spiritual, so they work together. And that's the idea behind the fact that it says when we went out of Egypt, we pulled all the wealth out of Egypt. We left Egypt with all the gold, all the silver, totally emptied it out. Why? Is it really necessary? Because what happened from a spiritual standpoint is we took out the nitzotzot, we took all the sparks of godly energy out. And just like those godly energy sparks are spiritual, the physical, the monetary aspect is the reverse side of the coin of the spiritual aspect. And that's why we had to take the money out as well, because they go together. In fact, the Tanya says that tzaddik that is not complete, that tzaddik logomor, is a tzaddik who suffers physically. He may be on a very high spiritual level, but he doesn't have money. He's poor. He's suffering in a physical way because he's incomplete. Because the ultimate state of shlemut, or completion, and this is how it will be when Mashiach comes. And this is why the Rebbe says every Jew needs to be rich, but gashmias, pashtus, a simple way. When my wife and I in the early stages of our marriage, and I was, it's 19 years, and I was still encouraging you I wanted her, I got her a gift certificate to go to the spa, wanted to put on makeup, to take care of, and she was so against this whole reality. And we went to her rabbi, Zichron Lebracha, Rabbi Notek, and she said, can you talk to my husband? He wants me to go to the spa. And he said, yeah, and you should. She's like, she was shocked. And he said, not because your husband said so, because that's what Hashem wants. That's what the Rebbe wants. The Rebbe said, every Jew needs to be rich. You have to take care of your physical self. Because when we get to days of Mashiach, the soul will get its energy from the body. Right now, the soul empowers the body. But the body will empower the soul. Meaning our physical bodies will be holier than our neshama. It's such a crazy concept.
Weren't the riches from Egypt. They were from the Egyptians.
Yes.
From the Jewish people's riches.
Correct.
So
So
how does that work?
So it's the same idea that the godly energy that was stuck in Egypt. In other words, the worst klipa in the world, if it doesn't have a godly spark in it, couldn't exist. So that energy we had to pull out. We had to suck it out of Egypt. And that's why everything collapsed. If you look through the history of the Jewish people, we've been expelled from 129 countries, I think. There's no other nation that's been what we've been through. And it's the same pattern. They bring us into their country. They put us in positions of power. We build up their economies. Their economies are doing great. They're making a ton of money. And then they say, let's get rid of these Jews. And then they throw us out, take our money, and the whole everything collapses because it goes together. And that's the whole point is when Mashiach comes, we will realize that there's no separation between Gashmis and Ruchnis, spiritual and physical. It's all one. It's all godly. And it's a shift in consciousness because for hundreds of years we've been taught you have to push away physical. The physical is bad. And you do have to have this first stage, what we call a skafia, of pushing away. And then you could get to a top, which is transforming. So you have to have a point of dealing with it. But like, we'll use the example of physicality. You should, I'm just talking to you specifically, right? So like, that wife, like, you're so afraid of this, but it's the opposite. You should be living in the spa and like, and like to the point that you're like, this is too much. And then you could balance it out in the middle point. So this is the idea. You have to really shift. I should be careful what I'm saying. I'm going to Dr. Frankenstein, I'm creating a monster. He's going to come out and be like, do you like my new diamond ring? I'm like, what? You told me. No, that's not what I meant. But the idea is it needs to balance together. And because ultimately, this is how you get to the middle. And the only way to get to the middle is, the Rambam says, it's the golden mean. So let's use an example of how do we get to the point where it's me and God together in the right place, right? So this kind of goes to the point that every one of us has a dual relationship with God. We say, Avinu Malkeinu, right? Avinu is our father, Malkeinu is our king. That means we're God's children, but we're also his servants. He's the king and he's also the father. So the father aspect is, it doesn't matter what I do. He's my father. He'll love me no matter what. The servant aspect is, I got to work. I don't care if he loves me or not. I got to work. We need both. So how do you know where to balance? So the answer is usually right in front of us. Those people who are treating God too much like a father and are kicking back and saying, doesn't matter what I do, they need to get to work. The people that are working too hard need to let go a little bit and say, he's also your father. Take the pressure off.
Why do we need to get to work?
That's why we're here. It's the whole purpose of creation. God put us here to work the garden. That's the whole point.
Do we all work in the same way, or we have different ways of working?
So there's different. The concept of work in Judaism is a little bit different than the normal work. On Shabbat, for example, it says we work 6 days and Shabbat we rest. So that has come to be defined as I go to work in my office or as a carpenter, as a doctor, as a realtor, whatever I am, and then I don't have to work on Saturday. But really, according to Kabbalah and Chassidus, what it means is we're working the tzimtzum. We're working the concealment of God. That all week long, we work in revealing God in a world that conceals him. How do we do that? There's 3 columns in the world: Torah, mitzvot, tefillah. Those are the ways we work Hashem, because God's hidden. He wants us to find him. So we have to work in finding him. And then when we get to Shabbat, God reveals himself to us based on the amount of effort we put forth in the week. Shabbat's like a mini Rosh Hashanah. Just like Rosh Hashanah, it's analyzed, okay, what'd you do this year? How things work out? And what kind of year is going to be upcoming? It's the same thing with a Shabbat. Shabbat is almost like a spiritual gas tank, a gas station. The more effort you put towards work, not your work for money, but you're working God in the world, the more in Shabbat, you get that revelation of God. It's like a, how should we say it? It's like anything else. You put forth a certain amount of effort, you get a certain amount of result. And then what happens is on a week-to-week basis, you're opening your tank, your capacity for more energy. And the more energy you put forth, the bigger your capacity grows, and the more you can build that closer relationship to Hashem. So it's a different concept of work, so to speak. Okay, excuse me. Okay. Since cause cannot exist without effect, Effect is also the cause of cause. In this sense, effect is the cause and cause is the effect. That's what we just said, meaning we can say that the coal is the effect and the flame is the cause, or vice versa. Since beginning and end are inseparable, their end is embedded in their beginning and their beginning in their end. Thus, even though Keter is cause and Malchus is effect, there's also a sense in which Malchus is the cause of Keter. Often in Kabbalah, where such a situation exists, Keter is seen as existing on a lower level than Malchus. For example, Keter of Bria is below Malchus of Atzilus, and Keter of Yetzirah is below Malchus of Bria, because as the worlds descend, you have like Malchus, let's say this is the world of Atzilus, that becomes Keter of the world of Bria below it. So then Malchus is actually giving in to Keter. So all these worlds, what happens is they all start becoming super connected. And Malchus is considered, according as we learned earlier on in Sefer Yetzirah, every one of these spheres have different energies, right? Chesed is kindness, Gevurah is strength. Keter is considered good, and Malchus is considered evil. Why? Because Keter is the closest to God, and Malchus is the furthest from God. So further away from God is considered evil, closer to God is considered good. But that very evil becomes the biggest good, because the further something is away, the more effort it has to get close. And when it gets close, it's that much more rewarding and that's much more beneficial. There's no greater joy in heaven than when someone who is living a life like I was living, totally disconnected from God, chooses to bring God into their life, especially if that life was a life that was enjoyable. I'm not saying me personally, but like this concept of God knows it's hard. He knows it's very difficult. And he knows every day we have choices to make, and it's very easy to make the easy choice. But when we make the hard choice and put forth that effort, that releases a spark of energy, a tremendous joy. And it's not just with serving God. Anyone who's, you ask people like, about meaningful things in their life, most meaning comes from effort. There's not much meaning of someone just giving something to you. It's nice. Wow, thank you so much. But if you've ever worked hard at anything, whether that's to you're in music school, right? Like you work hard to learn a new song, right? Or you in sports, in tennis, or in business, it's like, it's such a feeling of joy when you put so much effort into something and you're over and over again, and you're like, and then all of a sudden you have a success, you taste some level of success, whatever that means. Wow, it feels good. It just does. And that's the idea. So things that are the furthest away have the potential to get the closest, right? It's like if you take a string and the further down you pull it, when it goes back up again, the higher up it's going to go. So Malchus, which is really the furthest away from God, in the end, when it comes above, when it crowns God, it's the highest. So it's interesting how all these things really have dual realities to them.
What's the sentence of it's so important in Chassidut and Kabbalah, this concept that in English it's called
The end is wedged in the beginning.
It's so important. Every time they're mentioning it, what's the story about this sentence?
That's what we're learning about.
But
We're there now. Well,
every time they're like mentioning it, it's like that's something very basic that's very important. That there's the beginning and end. It's just it's not such a, I don't know. You understand what I'm saying?
I do, and I mean, hopefully you'll get to the answer now, because that's the whole point we're talking about right now. But that's the idea, is that the beginning and the end coming together. Okay. As discussed earlier, there is no term that can be used to describe God. God himself cannot even be called the cause. A cause is to some degree dependent on its effect, and God cannot be dependent on anything. The Kabbalists therefore teach that before creating anything else, God created the concept of cause. This is the the Sefira of Keter, crown. Keter is also often identified with will. This, however, is an anthropomorphism, since in man, will is the cause of all action. And it's a way to explain it. God's doesn't have really will, so to speak. So it says, therefore, the Sefer Yetzirah therefore states that the master is singular. He has no second. The Sefirot may be interdependent, but this does not include the infinite being. Since God is absolutely unitary, he cannot even be called the cause, because this would imply that an effect is second. In other words, this concept of cause and effect does not apply to God, because then you're implying that God does something and then there's a result of it, because God is above it. That's why it says in the beginning of Petek Eliyahu, you're one, but not in a numerical sense. Because meaning we can't say, oh, God's one and everything else is number two. No, God is completely removed from everything we're talking about. Everything we're talking about is kind of like the chessboard, if you will, that God created to navigate the world and his relationship with all of us. So cause would be, so to speak, Keter, and effect would be Malchus. But we can't say that God is the cause and the world is the effect, because then if that was the case, then we could say the world is also the cause and God is the effect. When we view the Sefirot as being 10 directions in a 5-dimensional continuum, we can also interpret this in another manner. Every pair of Sefirot defines an infinite line, extended infinitely in both directions. We spoke about this a little bit a few classes ago as a meditation to try to like close your eyes and picture north or south or east or west or up or down, and keep going beyond what you're capable of grasping, right? So like you could say, all right, what is up? Okay, the ceiling's up. What's above it? The sky. What's above it? The planets, stars, sun. Keep going. What's above it? I don't know. But the idea is we want to stretch open our consciousness to realize that all of these spirits, when you have the line of Keter Malchus, Keter is infinite good and Malchus is infinite evil. In other words, Keter infinitely goes forever close to God, and Malchus infinitely goes forever away from God, which is why you can see someone, and we are seeing it unfold in the world right now. And we all have this, whatever you want to call it, with this whole Epstein thing. You know, I'm trying to stay out of it because it's wow. Someone wrote in one of the comments, because I was trying to stay out of it, but I happened to see another clip last night because whatever, my curiosity got the best of me. And someone wrote in the comment, please, just a word of advice to everyone: be careful going down a rabbit hole with this, because it wound me, because I wound up on some kind of antidepressant medication and some kind of, because you don't realize that evil, you don't realize how you can't, you're getting a little taste of it now, but the concepts are so beyond. And I've been talking about this for 20 something years since I learned about all these things before I even started Tshuva. And I remember talking to friends of mine, they're like, you're nuts. People don't do that. I'm like, oh yeah, they do. You don't know about it, but they do. No one could understand that evil could be that bad. But it just shows you that if someone, God forbid, decides that they're going on this path, it just doesn't go. It could just keep going and going and going and going and going and going, right? I mean, look at Hitler, Yermak, his name should be erased. There was no stopping, you know, that God, he got killed or he killed himself, whatever the case may be. But this energy is just like, so these energies are infinite, just like good or chesed or kindness, right? And what's interesting is the way that God has set up the world is that whatever direction we pick in life, we will receive divine assistance. So if we did, that's why it says a mitzvah begets a mitzvah and an avera begets an avera. In other words, when you start doing, God forbid, bad things, it just becomes easier to do them more frequently and more frequently and more frequently. We start doing good things and helping people, that becomes an energy that you just keep doing and doing and doing. So the same idea exists from all these Sefirot. They're infinite. So again, there's 5 dimensions, right? There's 3 physical dimensions: north, south, east, west, up and down. Then we have the time dimension of past and future. And then what we have is the soul, or the spiritual dimension between finite and infinite, or God and man, however you want to look at it. And each one of these dimensions in these 5-dimensional reality go on forever. There's no end. That's what it means. Esser Sefirot blima. They're infinite. They keep going on forever. Now, this is a little bit trippy right here. When we view the Sefirot as being 10 directions in a 5-dimensional continuum, we can also interpret this in another manner. Each pair of Sefirot defines an infinite line, extending infinitely in both directions. The endpoints of an infinite line, however, come together and meet once again at the point of infinity. It can boggle your brain. It's something that it's really not possible to explain so much because you're trying to quantify infinitude. And how do you quantify something that's infinite?
Can you explain it slowly because it's in English?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very hard to quantify something that's infinite. We can't wrap our heads around that. Just like when we try to understand God, we're like, but I don't understand. Well, you're not supposed to understand. If you could understand God, you would be God. We think we have a finite brain, and yet we could wrap it around an infinite God who, I don't know what, there's 7-8 billion people in the world. And God has every single one of them wrapped up inside of his being. And he knows intimately every thought, every word, every action of every person, of every plant, of every animal in all the world and all the galaxies simultaneously. How is that possible? We can't make sense of that. It seems beyond our even grasp. But it's real, because otherwise none of us would be here. So to try to understand an infinite God with a finite brain is impossible. So it's a little bit tricky to understand this point, but that we're going to do our best we'll hit this paragraph and then we'll stop. Where it says the endpoints of an infinite line, however, in other words, come together and meet again once at the point of infinity. So if you have a line that goes on forever, let's say a line up and down, infinite, they keep going on forever. At some point, I don't understand in my brain, but they come together where infinite meets infinite. It's kind of the same idea of the end is wedged in the beginning, that all of these linear sequences ultimately become a circular sequence, meaning at some point in time, they come together. There's a meeting together of infinite lines. Let's just leave it at that because it's going to be pretty much impossible to explain it beyond that. I wish I could explain it better than that, but it's every time I get to the Sefer Yetzirah and I learn this part, I'm like, how's that possible? So you're not alone in trying to understand how this is possible. So here's what let's just read this point inside and then we'll stop in the next paragraph. This is a fact recognized by mathematicians, and considerable use of the point at infinity is found in complex analysis, the calculus of complex numbers. Okay, it's mathematical equations that talk about this concept of what is called the point at infinity, where infinite comes together. Although this is a highly abstract concept, meaning it's very difficult to wrap your brain around such a thing, it is not that difficult to understand. Imagine a circle with two antipodal points. This is what's inside on the top of 58. If you see the diagram, okay. You have O and N, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, two lines extending outward from O will once again come together at point N, right? You have both lines coming out from O.
Mm-hmm.
They'll reach N. Well, then what happens if we make the circle infinitely larger? So you keep opening it up, and opening it up, right? The circle. The larger the circle, the closer the curve approaches a straight line. That makes sense because it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Ultimately, what's going to happen is they start coming together. In the limit where the circle becomes infinitely large, the lines extending outward from point O actually become straight. But still, they come together at point N. This point at infinity is where all endpoints meet. We'll just leave it at that. With this concept of basically what the Sefer Yetzirah is getting at is this concept of the end is wedged in the beginning, meaning every single thing connects. There's no good. I mean, just think about this concept for a second. Every good deed you do, every tzedakah you give, stays with you forever. It's a hard concept to understand that for infinity. That's why the soul is so pained after 120 years, it goes to Gehenna, when it sees all the opportunities that not only benefited in this life, but benefit forever, for infinity, and say, I spent my life on my telephone. I spent my life watching movies or playing video games or liking other people's posts. Am I out of my mind? Like, look at this opportunities that I had that could last forever. And one of the ways, and we'll end here, but just to end with this concept, one of the ways to kind of wrap our head around this is that a lot of what's going on in the world right now is distractions. And it's really distractions from ourselves. It's really distractions from us, kind of looking in the mirror and saying, all right, let me get excuse my French, shit together. Like, what do I need to do? Because life goes by really fast, really, really fast. And there's just so many distractions out there that keep us. And in the end, we just start to realize that they're just draining our energy. They're not bringing anything worthwhile to our lives. It's not affecting us in any type of positive way. Where on the other hand, if we kind of just shift that consciousness and we start kind of becoming active participants in our life, we start realizing, yes, coming over, that over time, we can tap into this infinite energy, if you will, this infinite energy that is beyond our current grasp. And you start becoming part of what we say is a big picture of reality. And in that big picture of reality, it feels good. I used to be involved in a very hedonistic life. You doing, Javi? And it felt temporarily good, right? Whatever it was, food or physical pleasures or whatever I was doing. But I always felt empty afterwards. And now that I've shifted in my life, I don't really think about it too much, but like when you start becoming part of a bigger picture, of something more than you, of something more meaningful, Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that's one of the things he wrote to Meaningful Life is to tap into something that is bigger than you, that is more valuable than whatever is important in our individual lives. And we see this is really where change happens in the world, where movements take place, where people get together and basically say, together we're going to do something that's more than each one of us, right? And the 12 steps, they call it a higher power. We call it God, however you want to call it. The point is that when you tap into this global infinite energy, you start feeling better about yourself because you're no longer living for our little, tiny reality of what, not that our lives aren't important, but in the big picture, it's like piece of dust in the wind compared to what's going on. So when you tap into this bigger reality, that infinite energy not only benefits you and it benefits the whole, village, if you will, the whole complex, you start actually becoming more at peace with yourself because you feel good. Like, what, I'm doing something. I have a purpose beyond what is my day-to-day life. With that, wish everyone a Pesach Kasher Sameach. We're going to not have classes the next couple of weeks. And God should bless us all to have true redemption. As a nation and as individuals. You should take us out from any difficulties, any hardships, real, imaginary, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever they are. And we should be able to tap into our true infinite godly potential. God bless you.
Thank you. Oh.